Licensee Conduct, Chapter 2. In Chapter 1, we address the actions which could result in discipline as contained in a Utah statute. In this chapter, we will address the extensive guidance regarding appropriate licensee conduct found in the administrative rules. Violation of these rules constitutes unprofessional conduct. The administrative rules contain some of the same provisions as those previously covered with the statutory provisions. If the provisions are identical, we will not cover them again in this chapter. False device. A false device is any document or instrument which does not completely and accurately represent the true terms of a transaction. Clearly, a licensee's participation in preparing, knowledge of, or use of such a document is grounds for discipline. Please note the details in the following definition of a false device. All documents involved in a real estate transaction must accurately reflect the actual transaction which is occurring. Any deviation from the actual situation in any document constitutes a false device. Loan fraud. A false device is often an integral part of a loan. By definition, loan fraud occurs whenever a material piece of information is withheld from the lender. A material piece of information is information which would affect a lender's decision on the loan. Double contract. Let's discuss a specific type of false device to illustrate the concept of false devices and loan fraud. A double contract occurs when two purchase prices exist on the same property. This is usually done to obtain more favorable financing options. We'll review an example. A buyer wishes to purchase a property which is listed for $400,000. The buyer does not have any money down, but does not qualify for 100% financing. In other words, the buyer has been unable to find a lender willing to give him a loan for 100% of the purchase price. However, the buyer has found a lender who will give them a loan for 80% of the purchase price. The buyer then presents an offer for $500,000 to the seller. Remember, the asking price was only $400,000. The seller agrees to carry back a second mortgage for $100,000 in the contract. In other words, the $500,000 purchase price will be financed through a $400,000 first mortgage through the buyer's lender and a $100,000 second mortgage financed by the seller. Nothing is illegal about a seller agreeing to provide financing for the buyer. However, let's analyze the motivations behind the way this deal is structured. First, note the seller is only asking $400,000. Chances are the seller is not expecting the $100,000 second mortgage to ever be paid. In fact, the seller is most likely planning on forgiving or releasing the second mortgage immediately upon closing. The seller received their asking price and is most likely not expecting additional money. This means the true sales price is $400,000. Remember, the contract said the purchase price was $500,000. This was the purchase price represented to the lender. The lender may have agreed to approve the $400,000 loan only because they were financing 80% of the purchase price. You can see the purchase price was not really $500,000, but was $400,000. This is an example of a double contract. Two purchase prices exist. One is given to the lender to facilitate financing, and the other is the actual amount paid by the buyer and received by the seller. Often, there is only one actual contract that exists. The written contract typically reflects the purchase price represented to the lender, because the lender will require a copy of the purchase contract. If this is the case, then the buyer must rely totally on the seller honoring their verbal agreement. If the seller decides not to release the second mortgage, the buyer is obligated to pay the second mortgage. As we covered in contract law, all contracts covering real estate must be in writing. Verbal agreements covering the purchase of real estate are unenforceable. If the buyer and seller actually sign two contracts, determining which contract is actually enforceable may prove quite a problem. Either way, this transaction is often referred to as a double contract. The contract is a false device as it does not accurately reflect the true terms of the transaction. It is considered loan fraud because the lender does not have all the information. Licensees must use extreme care to ensure all documents relating to a real estate transaction accurately reflect the true terms of the transaction in every way. The possible consequences of participating in fraudulent schemes include the loss of license, fines, or imprisonment. Interest in a transaction. We discussed in Chapter 1 the obligation licensees have to disclose their interest in a real estate transaction. We get more details in the administrative rules. The rules contain the following situations when a licensee would be considered a principal in a transaction, which would need to be disclosed.